You're listening to the 95Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the 95 Podcast. It's Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network. And in case you are new to us, I just want you to understand what the name 95 stands for. The research for many years has shown us that the majority, 95% or so, of all churches in America are small and mid-sized churches. And so that's who we focus on trying to help. I feel like personally that the small and mid-sized church has been under-resourced for many, many decades as far as just helping to train and serve and come along beside. And so that's why we do what we do at 95 Network. One of the things that we also do is we work with individual churches doing a thing called VisionDay, where we work with a church. And today I actually have a pastor on the podcast from the Northeast, a good friend, and his church went through a VisionDay, and we'll talk about that somewhat toward the end of the podcast today. But first of all, I just want everybody to meet my friend Frank Termine. Frank, how are you doing today?
Good, man. Good to be here, and good to be talking with you again.
Tell me where you're located.
We're in West Hartford at the confluence of three neighborhoods. The north end of Hartford, the west end of Hartford, and West Hartford.
Have you always lived in the Northeast?
I have always lived in the Northeast, grew up in Rochester, New York, went to school in Northern New York at Clarkson University, moved to Philadelphia for 23 years, moved to Fishkill, New York, for 4 years,
Fishkill.
And then
I'd like to live there. So take a few moments, Frank, and just kind of walk us through your life, your story. I want to use that as the backstory before we move into, where you're pastoring and all that stuff right now. Kind of give us the Frank Termine story.
Okay, I'll give you the short one. As I said, born and raised in Rochester, New York, was in an Italian Catholic family and in a neighborhood that was all Italians. Went to Clarkson University, got a chemical engineering degree, got a job in Philadelphia, PA, and yes, I am still a loyal Eagles fan, as you might be able to see.
Well, you guys are doing good this year. Congratulations.
Yeah, for sure. And we got married at 23. I got 3 kids in Philadelphia. That's where our kids consider home. I was saved at age 42 at a Calvary Chapel in the basement of a synagogue at Calvary Chapel.
Okay, before you cover anything else, you got to tell us how that happened. You got saved at you're an Italian Catholic who gets saved at a Calvary Chapel in the basement of a synagogue. How did that happen?
Calvary Chapel, Rochester, was renting the facility for Sunday services, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were going to that church, and we happened to be in town, and we would go to their church when we were in Rochester, New York, which is our hometown. Mm-hmm. So that's how.
So what was it about the service or whatever that impacted you enough to make a commitment in that service?
My whole life, Dale, I was not saved at the time. My whole life was my career, mm-hmm. To be honest, and reflecting on it and getting up the food chain. And I was a vice president in a Fortune 500 company at the time.
Wow.
And I had just got pushed to the side. There was a promotion that should have been mine that wasn't mine. I wasn't chosen. I was devastated. I was in the down. And I didn't know, I was beside myself. And if you would ask me, I would have said, my priorities in life are God, family, and career, but it was not really true. Mm-hmm. It was the other way around. And we go there, and the pastor's preaching about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. And he says, and you might be in the fire today. And my sister-in-law looks down and you at me. It was like, this whole thing was a setup. You've been to those services.
Oh, I know
right?
exactly what it's like. No, exactly.
Where they call ahead and tell the pastor, okay, you got to say this, that, and the other thing. And he had me, and preached the gospel, and I said, man, that is exactly what I need. And I got saved on September 2nd, 1996 down there. And, that started a great journey for me.
Oh, that is such a great story. I couldn't just skirt over that one. It's like, okay, because that's good. So you get saved. What happens after that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I go back to work and I get a great position back at work, but we get bought by a bigger company, and they don't need two vice presidents of marketing. So I know I'm toast, but at the time they did let me go, and I got 3 years worth of severance.
That's
and
nice.
I felt like God, yep. And I felt like God was calling me into something different. I started working for a friend in a small company, and it was a long shot, but it didn't pan out, and I knew it. And, God started saying, you need to be doing this full time, because I started teaching in a small group, and I did. And, as I started looking around and talking to people, they said, well, if you're going to be a pastor, you're going to need to get an MDiv, not just an MS, which happens to be a three-year degree. And the Lord provided 3 years of pay so that I could leave with 3 kids heading to college, and I was able to do that. So that was neat. I went to Biblical Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Then spent 4 years as associate pastor at Fishkill Baptist Church, which is a far bedroom community in all the people who work in New York City. It's up the Hudson River.
Uh-huh.
And then got called here 15 years ago to Calvary Church in West Hartford. And I'm 68 years old now, and in the middle of a pastoral transition where the young man that I'm training will become lead pastor, and I'll become associate pastor for some period of time.
I can't wait to talk about that in a few minutes, because that is one of my big question marks, is why we being the church in America don't do a better job with pastoral transition. So I'll definitely want to circle back around to that in a few minutes. Tell me what it's like doing ministry in the Northeast. This podcast goes all over the country. I'm in South Carolina. I've always been here, but I've done many things. I've been up to your place and many other places in the Northeast, and it just seems to be a very difficult place to do ministry. What's it like for you?
It is what it is. I watched the movie. I used to complain like everybody else up here about how hard the ground was. And then the movie Paul came out. I don't know if you remember that movie about Paul, the life of Paul. And it was him in Rome, and they were lighting up Christians and candles. And I committed to myself, I'm not going to complain anymore.
Well,
I have no reason to complain.
That's the first pastor that I've talked to in the Northeast who has that perspective from that reason, but it's a good one. Okay, so how long have you been at that particular church?
It'd be 15. It's I just had my 15-year anniversary.
Has this been the only church you've been the lead pastor at?
It is. Yep. Yep.
Cool. And so what was it like when you got there? Did you walk into a good situation, a tough situation? What's it been like being the pastor over the 15 years?
Well, this is what happened. I came here. Well, the church had a split in 2005. At one time in its heyday, they used to get, they were located in Hartford, and they used to get 250 kids to come to their Sunday school. They had the old bus ministry, and it was the largest church in the area, 450 people, which is large for around here then. And they weren't very outward focused, and it just went downhill after many years. They actually went through a church split in 2005 after they had moved to West Hartford, and they had an interim pastor. And in that period of time, they joined Converge, which is the old Baptist General Conference. I came at the end of 2007, and they were ready to go. They had been kind of sitting, kind of licking their wounds. And they were ready to go. And we were getting 48 people a week. It was the average in 2007. You've been to our church. You can see 350 people, preaching to 20 or 30 people in that size church. And of course, they all sat all over the church.
Yeah.
because those were their seats. It was tough duty in the beginning, and the church was older, very few kids, predominantly white. And we are at the confluence of very diverse neighborhoods. The north end of Hartford is a predominantly Black and very poor area, one of the poorest areas in the richest state in the country. We are in West Hartford, just on the edge. We're right on the border. And middle class and upper class, a lot of old money, a lot of old houses. And then the other street going the other way, the governor's mansion is at, and it's an eclectic neighborhood, all kinds of different things. So I just prayed, Lord, I pray that, we have a church that anyone from any of these neighborhoods would come and feel comfortable. And it was so funny. One of the first Sundays I was preaching here, I looked out from my office, and we used to have a carload of older women that used to come. They were, 70s and 80 years old. And there were four of them, and three of them had walkers. And they used to get here real early every Sunday morning, staying right at where the door at the entrance in the lobby was. And their walkers were lined up. And we used to have a woman here used to play the organ, and she'd be playing the organ. And they'd have we'd have those old women, sitting up front, the sweetest little old ladies you ever met in your life. Great people. I just looked up to God and I go, if we're going to get young, this is going to be a work of the Holy Spirit. I'm 50. I was 53 at the time. So
it's your first church.
Yes, first time leading. But you know what? God did a wonderful work. I remember the first Easter we had a couple come and visit. They brought a baby, and we had the women had a nursery sign up that people were scheduled to go. We had no kids in the nursery, but on Easter Sunday, a family showed up. They're all running around. We got a baby. And the baby,
it's like you almost attack them.
And they just loved on the baby, and the family started coming, and they
so
kept
cool.
coming.
Hey, let me ask you this question: Do you know, or what was the split about? Do you know the details of why the church split?
Yeah, it's a I don't want to name the seminary, but this seminary has a not a good reputation for making pastors that can blow up churches.
Okay.
And this guy was very hardcore complementarian, very hardcore elder rule. And that's just, it was just, it just rankled everybody. And he built this team, and the people were here and serving and for years. And, he just didn't treat them well. So
was that when the church was at its height, or was it at its height before he came?
No, he grew the church from about 220 down to 140.
Yeah.
And then the church split, and he took 70 with him down to down the corner, and 70 stayed here. By the time I got here, it was down to 48 people a week.
What was it like for you being a pastor? It's your first church you're pastoring. You've been on staff at another church, so you knew church politics. But what was it like coming into a situation where you got to heal people before you can go forward? How was that for you?
Well, I'll be honest. I'm not a mercy guy. My wife is. She's got enough mercy for the both of us. That's just not my gift. But God had brought a mercy guy to be the interim pastor.
Okay.
And he helped them get through that. And by the time I got here, I'm a get up and go kind of guy. And they were ready. They were ready to get up and go.
Okay.
The first year was still hearing a lot of stories, and, me trying to be as merciful as possible and say, okay, well, that's past. God's going to do a new work, and we got to be prepared for God's new work. And the people really responded well, and they did. And they were very faithful. It was hurtful, but, after about a year, as new people started coming, the old faded away and the new came.
Okay. And what year was that, as far as that transition began to happen for you?
I came at the end of 2007.
Okay. And so then you pastored for many years. What was that process like for you?
Well, slowly but surely, we grew the church every year. nothing big,
Mhm.
nothing to, that's going to make the journals. But every year we added a few people for the first 8 years, and we grew to about 150 people in the first 7, 8 years.
That's good.
Grew to 150,
Yeah.
and the church really started to look differently. Since that time, we've been 35 to 45% people of color.
Mhm.
The biggest majority would be Black people, and that's Africans, islands, African Americans.
Mhm.
Uh, a third of, and now a third of our congregation is 18 or younger.
Ooh, that's so good. How'd that happen?
I'll give Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit all the credit there. We just had an Awana program, and the church's DNA was always kids.
Mhm.
It was always, very family oriented. It was just in our DNA.
Mhm.
And so with just the right, as we made changes, families started coming, and I give it to the Lord. And in our kids, we have no majority race. The largest race being would be black, would be the black race, would be the largest contingents that we have. And so God just did it. We just tried to love everybody who came through the door, and we treated everybody as with love, the love of Christ.
So
And
you're reaching these kids. Are there families coming too, or is it just?
oh
Are
yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh
All right.
yeah,
Good. Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. Cool.
Oh, definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
So, fast forward somewhat. At some point, you and I began to connect because you had heard about VisionDay. What kind of led to that?
Well, I would start out by saying that if anybody's considering VisionDay, they have to see it, in my opinion, not as an event, but
Mhm.
as a point on a continuum.
I like that.
And let me tell you, because that's part of our story. By the first quarter of 16, we had ballooned up to 165 people, and we were talking about adding a second pastor, which really didn't happen.
Mhm.
But what happened, that was at our high point. What happened is that same slow growth that we saw over the years, we started seeing a slow, steady decline. Um, and I think the number, one of our guys said it was 3 people per quarter, which, and nobody was leaving because of anything. And it wasn't really a people leaving problem. It was that we stopped adding enough new people to cover the turnover, which is, just normal in a church.
Sure.
Um, and so we were getting now the second half of 2019, and I start asking myself, I'm 65 going on 66, and you have that that crisis you have at that age.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'm starting to think, is it time for me to hang up my spikes? Am I the issue here? Do I have to get out of the way? Because I had been in a church where the pastor overstayed his welcome, and pastors staying too long can run the church into the ground. And I
Yeah.
just committed I was not going to be that guy. So I started thinking. So I said, I gotta. So I'm. This is the type of guy, the old engineer kind of guy.
Mhm.
I wrote up what I thought was where we were, and I said I was going to show it to people that I cared about that would tell me what I needed to hear. And I started with my wife, and she going, all you're doing is looking at the negative. What about all the positive? You're not looking at that. So I said, okay. So I put that in there.
Miss Mercy.
Yeah. And, I'm sure I'm the only pastor that's ever done that before.
Yeah, I don't believe that's true.
No. So I went out to 3 people that I thought, 2 friends and the Converge Northeast director, Tim Panzani, who
Tim was on it, huh?
Yeah. And I remember saying to Tim, if you tell me I need to go, I'm going to go, because him and I have a good relationship. And he said to me, no, what's going on is going on all throughout the Northeast. That's not you. You're not ready. It's not you. And so did the other people. They said, no. So I said, okay, but we were really busy at the time. It was still a time of confusion for me. And so I had just canceled on Tim to go to the annual meeting, which was a big deal. And so I called him up and told him, I'm sorry, here's the situation. He said, I understand, just don't go. So I had signed up for your 90. You had a presentation that was coming down at the Connecticut shore, which I had already signed up for. And to be honest with you, if I could have gotten out of it, I would have gotten out of it. I'll be honest with you, but I just canceled on Tim.
If there's anything that describes you, Frank, it's being honest. That's what I love. Yeah, I did.
So,
we were in near. We're on the coast, weren't we?
Yeah, you're on the coast. You're on the coast. Yeah. So to come for your few hours in lunch, it was going to be a day that I didn't have, but I had to go, so I went there. But during the time, and I didn't want to be there, and I was sort of half listening. But then you started talking about Vision Day, and I said, that might be something we could really use. So I got all the information, and I was really perked up about that. But I stuffed it away. I had it, in my folder, and I came back, and now it's time to meet with the elders. Mm-hmm. And I have the write-up, and I'm not going to tell them what the other people said. And I go to them and I said, hey, look, again, if you want me to go, I'll go. Here's the write-up. And they looked at me like I had, 3 eyes and said, what are you talking about? And they said, no, we don't want you to go. Yes, we do agree. We have a problem that, the attendance problem, because, that's unsustainable. And also male leadership problem is unsustainable. We got to do something different, but it's not you. They said, okay. And I said, well, here's this thing I got in my drawer here about a Vision Day. This might be, and they looked at it and they said, man, that's perfect. I think that's what we need. We need an outside thing.
So
said,
you had Vision Day in the drawer.
I had it in the drawer. I kept it.
I'm glad you kept it.
I kept it. And I presented it to them and they said, perfect. That's what we need. Now, we had the authority and the money to go ahead and do it, but we made a great decision, not because we're smart. The Lord led us into this. Uh-huh. And we said, we were going to go to the people and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay out the whole regime to them, and we're going to ask them to vote on whether we do Vision Day or not. And so we did it for
the church to vote on it.
We got the church to vote on it.
Oh, wow.
Because we said, if we're going to do this, we want buy-in from everybody right up front.
Yeah.
We want buy-in right up.
So hey, let's do this, because I've got a question I want to ask you to keep going in that direction. But let's take a short break, and then we'll be right back, because I've got a good question for you. So we'll be right back. Back here with Frank Termine from Calvary Church in Connecticut. And man, we were having a great time talking through the process they went through to get Vision Day. And as I discovered, Frank had Vision Day over in the drawer. Got the church to vote on it. But Frank, one of the things about our relationship, you probably, I think I've done 60 Vision Days, and I think you were the most thorough vetting pastor I've ever worked with. I mean, you vetted me. I got you referrals, the whole deal. Now you tell me the church voted on it. It was a miracle we got there.
Well, you know what? It wasn't a miracle, but it was supernatural.
It was. So pick up. So you go to the church and you talk about it. Keep on going from that point.
So I laid it all out there. I said, this is what I'm going through. I talked to people. I talked to the elders, and now I'm talking to you. And I said, I laid it all out there, because one of the things that I was taught, that a leader defines reality for the people underneath them. And so I defined this is where we are, people. Mm-hmm. I was openly and honest. Now, we have a good relationship. The church we have, we're one of those churches that are blessed that we don't have any division. Mm-hmm. And so we have good relationships. So I was able to be honest without fear. Mm-hmm. And so we laid out, here's what we want to do as Vision Day. We had one of the elders present the whole thing, not me. And we voted on it, and it was unanimous. Let's go ahead and do it.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So again, this is why I say it's a continuum. You could see the hand of God, moving all the way along this whole thing here.
Yeah.
So they did that. And what we did next, in January every year, we have a concerted time of prayer. And this year we prayed about Vision Day. Weekly, we had meetings to pray about Vision Day.
I remember.
And we said, we don't want a new plan. We want this is Jesus's church. We want his plan. Mm-hmm. So we prayed that God, through the Holy Spirit, would show us a plan. that he wanted. And
I just remember you're again another one of the things that make me think of you. Why I love you so much. You contacted me a couple of times to let me know that y'all were praying about what to pray about. You were praying, and it was just so inspiring to me because we live in this era. I always say that we live in the residue of the seeker and attractional movement, and so everybody's always looking for a quick fix. Everybody's looking for, some people will book VisionDay to get us to come in so we can give them some silver bullet to solve their problems, and it doesn't exist. But you guys laid so much good groundwork in prayer before I ever got there. And yeah, we had some situations and things we had to work through and address, but it was able to do it because y'all bathed it in prayer before we got there. And I just was so touched by that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we did vet, I wanted to make sure that, we're going to spend a whole bunch of time and money, and not a whole bunch of money, but a whole bunch of time. And we wanted to make sure we were going to get something it was going to make a difference. Yes. We wanted to make sure there was going to be fruit that came from it. And, you gave us some people to call, and from our size church, which I think is really important, because most of the things you can get like this are really for larger churches. They don't work for smaller churches.
They're out of reach. Just financially, they're out of reach for most churches.
Well, yeah.
So how many people were part of the church at this time? As far as what was your kind of average attendance at this time that you're doing this?
What's kind of neat, and I'm glad you asked that because I had forgotten about that, is that quarter, which would have been the first quarter of 2020, was the first time since 2016 that we had grown. We hadn't even done anything yet except prayed and told people what the issue was. Mm-hmm. And we grew like about 14%. So we were that quarter till March 20th, I think. And if you remember, that was an important.
Yeah, we'll get on that in a minute.
Yeah. And we had 132 people.
That's
so
awesome.
We had grown. We had grown over 10% at that point.
Yeah, see, so the thing about VisionDay can help your church if you were stalled out and just don't know what to do, or you're on a negative decline. But it's also really wise. Like this particular week, we're recording this podcast. I'll be flying to Missouri tomorrow. I'm working with the church in Missouri, and this church is actually doing really, really well. But they want to do a reset. They want to make sure, okay, and this is very important for people to understand. What got you to where you are probably won't get you to where you need to go. And churches are notorious for, and you know what? It goes back. It's as old as the Bible itself. When Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on the mountaintop, and there's Moses and Elijah, then God speaks, and Peter's response was, "Let's just camp here." And so a lot of churches have done that. They've just kind of camped at what God did in the past. And so when your church gets to the place where it's talking more about what God did instead of what God's doing, there's a need for a shift. And so this church I'm going to work with this week, they've been doing great, but they know we need to plan ahead. And so there's all kind of scenarios where having a day like we had with VisionDay is helpful.
Oh yeah, no question. And so we went about a team selection, which you and I had talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And because of the kind of church we are, we had 4 criteria for the people on the team. We wanted to have all our ministries represented. We wanted to make sure that somebody was passionate about every ministry. We wanted to make sure that the team we put together looked like our congregation. We wanted it to be diverse.
Very smart. Mm-hmm.
We wanted it to look like our congregation. We wanted to make sure that we wanted to pick informal and formal leaders, because the reason for that is we wanted to make sure that there was somebody there that if their heads were going up and down, the people that follow them's heads would be going up and down too.
That's good.
And we wanted people who could be, I use Tony Evans's word, evangelically brutally honest. And because you've got to set reality, and if something's not working, you got to be able to say it to the rest of the group, and the group has to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
And we wanted people to be able to think that thought strategically. So, we put a lot of time and effort and prayer into team selection, and you saw who we had. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that I loved about it, which was really important, and I think this is good, is we had an outside person leading this, and the pastor and me were seated as part of the team. Yeah. I was one of equals, And it wasn't going to be my plan.
Yep.
It was going to be our plan.
I want to interject there. That's one of the things that we do when we do a Vision Day. And I tell the pastor, and I told you this, I tell every pastor up front, I'm not there to add to your load. I'm not there so we can come together for a day, come up with a bunch of new things for the pastor to do. The objective of it, actually, for the pastor, as much as the pastor can lay back and listen to where the congregation's at and where the leaders are at, it's very helpful. But I'm there to lift your load. I'm there to help you to see where the team is. And I was really pleased with the group we had together. It took a second or two to get them going, but boy, we did. And people got real honest.
Yeah. And Dale, I want to put a plug in for you here. You have an evangelical bluntness. You're able
that
to.
That is a compliment coming from you.
And I said that to Pastor Tom, which you came back, and I told him Dale is going to say what needs to get said, and he won't be afraid to say it.
Yeah.
And if you're the type of person that could say in a nice way, okay, well, you just told me what you're doing isn't working. Why do you keep doing it? I could say that and it's going to be hurtful, but because you're an outsider and we're all there, people just will react differently. And I'm sure you've had some probably people who didn't react so good to it, but I think for us, that was really important and really good.
Well, I care about them. And so honestly, I haven't had a lot of negative, at least to my face, reactions to things. Cause I didn't come there to beat you up. I came there but sometimes some people will perceive honesty as beating them up. And I don't want that to happen.
No.
Yeah, it's a fine line.
Yeah. And you have outside eyes with a lot of diverse experience in our size church. Like you said, your lobby's dark and uninviting. And I knew that, and I've said that, but when you said it was, oh, I never saw that. No one ever said that before.
That happens a lot, where I'll come in and say exactly what the pastor's been saying, and they're like, wow, that's great. And he's like, I've been saying it for years.
It's like being a parent.
Yes,
that happens
absolutely.
to parents a lot.
Yeah, it happens.
and you just lead us through a good old-fashioned Christianized SWOT analysis. Which was good. I think it was good. And one of the things I appreciate, and you spent time on historical highlights, and you probably hear this a lot, but most people don't have a full picture of our historical highlights. So when you get everybody in a room, I'm sure you hear all the time, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that happened at our church.
That's why we do it.
And I know with Pastor Tom, that was a big deal for
what you do when you go back. And I don't go back. Some churches, were founded in the 1800s, so we don't go that far back, but we like to go back, anywhere from 40 years, somewhere in that area. Yeah. And what we're looking for are repeating patterns. And our friend, Pastor Tom, that was one of the things that once we put it on paper, they're like, oh my goodness, we cycle back around to this same issue over and over and over. And so that's it's really amazing how we'll go over the history of the church, and especially people who are newer, who are involved in leadership, didn't know things, but it's very enlightening to talk about some of those things, because what you typically have are a lot of unresolved issues moving forward,
But on the other hand, too, you have church DNA, which has some negative things, but also there's some positive things.
Absolutely.
That values that just get passed down from one generation to the next. And that's an important thing, too, to realize. And, children and family is one of those things at our church. It's always. And also you went through assessing the current. And, you brought out a few things that, you were able to highlight them. We knew them, we talked about them, but you were able to bring them to right up to the surface and in bright lights. You said we were dated. We had a dated look to our building and grounds. And you wrote down on your sheet here, I got it right here, old-fashioned and dated / depressing is what you wrote. And it was true.
You sure?
It was true. And we needed to hear that.
Yeah.
We all agreed we needed to do a better job of reaching men. And you were the one, not us. You were the one that said, hey, folks, you're just way behind on technology. And you were the one with the children's sign in. And when we told you about our internet problem, you really hit on that. And there was like about 3 or 4 things on our to-do list that had to do with technology. And you were right
Yeah.
on, spot on. And we would not, I don't think we would have got there from here if it wasn't for you.
Well, it was, I want you to reach people, and I knew you wanted to reach people, but what happens so often, I go to a church and there's no signage. Let's just say there's no signage around. So you can't find, here I am as a guest, I can't find the restroom. And so I'll have to ask somebody, and then, and sometimes I'll go places, they'll tell me how to find the restroom, and I can't find it because there's no signage. And I'll bring that up, and the comment is always this: well, everybody knows where the restroom is. I'm going, no, they don't. But if your mindset is, well, I've been going to that restroom for 30 years, that doesn't mean that new people know where it is. And so,
No.
that's part of what happens as we come together like that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, we came out with what we needed to focus on for some period of time was 20 to 50-year-olds with children wanting children. And you were able to help us because people need to understand that just because you're focusing on a particular group doesn't mean you're telling the other people we don't want you.
Absolutely.
And if you do things to try to get this one group, some of those things are going to get those other groups too. Mm-hmm. And you have people like you explained, which was very helpful, that hey, older people who want to see their grandkids come to the church and their kids come to the church, they'll want to get onto the mission too. They'll understand. And so to be able to help us process through that, you from the outside, I mean, I could have said all the same things, but you from the outside, you were independent. So that was helpful.
Cool. I'm so glad.
Yeah. And you had that, what was surprising is you were really pushing us for a new mission statement. It was good because you worked us through and we came up with a very simple mission. And if you walk into our nice bright lobby now, you will see our mission. It says to know Jesus and respond. Something simple that everybody can understand. And I want to really get to how God was working, but I'll get to this later. I'll come back to it, but I want to tell you a story.
While we're there, go ahead and do it now. Yeah.
Well, it's a bigger story that I want to get to about how God was working, because you came up with we needed technology and internet, refresh the look of the place, and evangelism near and far. One of the things you came up with, reinvigorate missions, that we came up with. Mm-hmm. And so we left there with an action plan and owners, deliverables, and dates. It wasn't just, okay, we got all this information. All right, I did my job. Give me my money and I'm going home. No, you made us sit down and, okay, who's going to present this? When are you going to present this? How are you going to do it? So we had an actual plan to do it. And the nice part about it wasn't me doing the presenting, which was, I think, very important.
Yeah, one of the things we do in the small church typically is we make plans, but oftentimes we don't follow through, and then there's no accountability for not following through. And so what we do at the end of VisionDay, we literally put dates and times and when you're going to meet, and honestly, the group itself holds each other accountable. And so I'm glad you pointed that out, because it doesn't. You have the greatest plan in the world, but if nobody takes initiative to implement it, it's worthless to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I have to tell you 3 stories.
All right, let them plan on us.
Okay, you got this continuum and the hand of God working, and it just sends chills up your spine when you could see clearly this was a God thing. This is all part of this plan. Mm-hmm. With the technology part of it, we had VisionDay in February 2020. COVID hits in March. And we had explained to you that we had an old broken DSL line, and we were like a spur, and the company didn't want to fix it.
Yep, I remember that.
And so it was real slow, and it was going to cost $8,000 for us to go to the cable company because they had to dig a trench across the street to get to us. And so everybody was balking on that. But COVID hits. And now, if you don't have good internet, you're done.
Yep.
And so that got to be real obvious, real quickly. And the people, this is the hand of God. You might, here's a positive thing about COVID is the people that were kind of dragging their feet, and that's probably a little strong. All of a sudden are saying, hey, we got to invest in our internet. We need faster internet. And so you just say, that's a great idea. And so COVID actually got us the internet we needed. It got us, the building, we got state-of-the-art internet. We got super fast internet through our building.
Our listeners have no idea what a miracle that is compared to what you had, because it was dated.
Well, yeah, it was great. So that was good. Awesome. So you could see the hand of God coming from this. Mm-hmm. The second thing was, we needed a refresh of our building. That came in places. Yeah. April. So Vision Days in February, COVID, March, April, we get a check for almost $250,000 from somebody who used to come to our church as a kid. It's maintained contact. The sister still goes here. And she passed away and sent us like $238,000. Wow. We had no money to do anything.
I remember.
And earlier in 2019, a man moved from Alaska who was now a COO, very strong Christian, who was president of a design and build company. So we have breakfast one day and he says to me, he goes, if we just did this at your church, our church would look so much better. And I go, yeah, but we don't have the money to do it. And he goes, well, when you're ready, let us go, because how about if we design a plan for you and we won't charge you and we'll do the work, but you got to pay for that. And I said, well, great. Now we just need the money. And, God brought the money.
That's so
and
cool.
They did $40,000 or $50,000 of design work. Wow. And he walked everybody through everything because, he was able to say, people have questions. We had nice looking wood, but it was old and it was dark, and you saw it. Yeah. I think you saw the old time. And he said, no, if you put a fresh coat of paint on here and do this and that, and the other thing, we'll be able to recover all of, the nice structure, and the cross will pop. So he did a great job selling it, and we had the money, and it looks completely different. And I remember his woman, who was not a Christian, comes in, his design person said, when I come into a building, I want to know what this building's about.
Oh, that's cool.
And I walk into your lobby and she said, what do you do here? What is it? I understand, it's a church. I could see the steeple and everything, but what are you about? You really need something. And so she helps us. She's not even saved. She helps us. And now we've got a big old cross on a hill it's very simple. And it says, to know Jesus and respond. She goes, oh, okay. Now I know what you do here.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's
and so God,
cool, man.
God brought, again, I think it's important for your listeners to see that this is a continuum. This is the hand of God moving
yes.
all through this. And the last thing, which didn't fit for me, but I said, no, I'll keep quiet. We needed to do a better job of evangelizing and drawing people in. But one of the things on on your target list there was to reinvigorate missions, which I didn't see how that would, I could, if you got a heart for the lost, you have a heart for the lost, whether they're near or far. But again, in 2020, we had to cut the missions budget to 8% of giving. That's not what we wanted to do, just because giving was so bad. But at the end of 2020 into 21, we had a lot of missions turnover. We lost a missionary to death. Some came out, others we stopped. So now we had a bunch of money with some place to go with the 8%, and nobody liked the 8%. So we said, we're going to challenge ourselves and and go back up to 10% in 2021. And so we said, well, let's not just run and go out and find a minute. Let's pray on this and see what God does. So Pastor Russell and I go to a Converge Northeast conference, and he sees a woman there. She sits right next to us at our table. And he says, oh, it's great to see you and everything. What are you doing now? And she says, oh, I work for Converge, and I help churches pick strategic partners to go to unreached people groups.
Oh, that's so
They're
good.
going to, and so she says, "Oh yeah, I lead the church through a process, and we get them to focus on an unreached people group that Converge Missionary is at, and they kind of focus on that. It becomes a whole focal point of the whole church." And we're in the car after. I go, that was not a chance occurrence.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to be disobeying God if we don't invite Candace to come in and do it. He said, "Yeah, me too." Yeah. So that started a whole process. Again, we had to get a team and everything, and we're going to Senegal. That's going to be one of our we're sending 3 people to Senegal, which we've never had a missions team go out.
This is good.
To Africa, and we got the money to do it, and which is kind of neat. Now you wonder, how does this all fit in? One of the outreaches for Senegal is a university outreach. And we have some young people on this missions committee that's doing this thing. And they're looking at each other and going, wait a minute, we have the University of Hartford right over there. We got St. Joe's University right over there. We got UConn Law, a little bit farther away. And we're going to go all the way to Senegal to do university. Why aren't we doing it here?
There you go.
And so there's something brewing about it. God hasn't completely percolated that, but people are just saying, this doesn't make sense. So, and that's a good dissonance. Absolutely. That's a really good dissonance. So I guess that's our story of Vision Day. Those are the big things. There's other things too, but we're still working the process.
You guys, y'all done so much. Before I run out of time on the podcast, so I do want to talk a few minutes about. You said you're in the midst of a succession plan. Kind of, what are you doing? How's it working? Do you have target dates for when you're going to step away and the new guy take over, or what's your plan right there?
Well, again, I got to tell you, this is another God thing. I told you in 2016 we were trying to get a second pastor, and we challenged people to give enough money so we could, be able to put a second pastor on. And we felt like we had a matching grant that would get us there. All we had to do was, and we had like commitments for virtually all of it. We set a goal, and we were like $8,000 short. We fell short of our goal, so we didn't do it. And so we asked ourselves, what happened? Did we not do a good job, or was it not the right timing? And we were beating ourselves up, and we said, well, let's just go on. And it was the wrong time and the wrong guy. So we have a guy that goes to our church, Pastor Russell now, who is heading an agency that the whole, it's called the Urban Alliance, and he binds together like 95 different churches and organizations doing temporal work, and so we're working as the church, earning the right to give. So anyway, he comes to me, and we've been good friends. I mentored him for years, and he comes to me and he says, "You know what? I've been going through a rough time, but God, I think, is calling me to become a pastor." And he said, seminary, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And he says, I just feel like I got this call to teach and everything. So I go, okay. So I knew God has always blessed us with money. And I knew at some point God was going to ask me to give back a little bit. So I started asking him, and I did some numbers on a piece of paper. And then I said, Russell, would you consider being a pastor here? He says, but I haven't got a degree. I said, what if I trained you? What if you went through Frank Termine University?
Wow.
And he said, I don't know about that. Do you think that would be good? And so again, we go to Tim Ponzani, and I go, Tim, I got another proposition for you. Again, and I told him, if this is a dumb idea, just tell me.
Sure.
And I'll forget about it. He says, I think that's a great idea. That's the way it should be done. It's the way it's always been done. He says, yeah, we're behind you. And in fact, he said, I think we'll support you with some money. Wow. He said, I think you should go out. You guys pay a third. We'll pay a third of Russell, and have him raise support. And so we said, okay. So then we go back to the church, and I start with the elders, and they say, yeah, this is a great idea. Then we go the ex-elders. Yeah, this is a great idea. And then we go to the ministry. Yeah, that's a great. And then we go to the church. They all know Russell.
Yeah.
And they all love him. He's been an elder. Yeah, this is a great idea. Let's do it. And we put together a financial plan. And so I have to, I'm fine. I'm taking a pay cut during this transition period. So it's a 2.5 year training program that he's going through the entire Bible. I'm basically taking all the stuff I learned at seminary and just giving him the stuff he needs.
Sure, pouring it
you learn a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, what he needs. And we're going through it, and he's working through it. And we have this plan, and we got money from Converge Northeast. The one thing, he had to go out and raise $60,000 of support to be able to do it. And I said, well, as soon as you get that, we can start. And, I said, we don't want to start, because once you start, fundraising is hard stuff. So he starts around April. And so July 1 is the target date. And I'm thinking, it's going to be hard for him to raise that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by June, he had commitments for $150,000.
Oh, my goodness.
And so, you talk about the hand of God making this stuff. And we had to increase our budget.
Yep.
And we told the people, this is a 3-year commitment till we get through it. You're going to have to pay for 2 pastors.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to take a pay cut, big pay cut. But yeah, it's still, and we increased the missions budget at the time. And you know what? This year we were 13% over budget.
That's so good.
Giving over budget.
That's so good.
And it was a stretch. So you just feel like, this is the hand of God moving. Yes. It's just like, I don't want to screw this thing up.
I'm with you. The thing I love about your church and you and what's happened is, when I first met you, I don't know that we would describe you guys as a healthy church, but today I think we would. And so I'm in your corner. I'm so proud of you. I'm very excited about your church. I'm looking forward to the people that, we hear about that they win to Jesus over the next 20 and 30 years because of the changes that you've made. And, man, I thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today and share. I wanted pastors to hear that, it doesn't matter where you are, whether it's you're doing good or you're stalled or you're in decline. If you'll take a step toward Jesus, he'll take a step towards you. And so, Frank, thank you so much for the time, for sharing with us today, and for your friendship. Man, I really appreciate you so much. And thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yep. And we, maybe we're going to have you back for the next visit pretty soon for another Vision Day.
I can't wait, my friend. It'll be so much fun. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care, brother.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.